What the f, Australia?
So that is so much better. I've moved the van into the sunshine and cranked the heater. G'day everyone and welcome to build episode number 10. Today I am tackling the electrical mainly, but I also have some other jobs that I am going to show you my progress on, as I have big plans for next week with installing the shower potentially. So in order to get that done, I've got quite a few little things that add up that need to be done. But first and foremost among them, as I said, is the electrical. Now, the astute of you out there will have noticed I've already gotten started. I've had a sneaky head start. And the way I wanted to show you the wiring today was not so much just like all time lapse and you see me putting them up, because I feel like everyone can understand running cables and it changes from van to van. What I wanted to talk about today with the electrical is the things that I found kind of hard to get my head around, and it's all pretty basic because my level's pretty basic of knowledge, but I want to share with you what I've learned, and hopefully that helps some of you out with understanding electrical and even potentially doing it in your own build. So the fun thing about starting to run all your electrical wires is that it really allows you to picture in your head exactly what it's going to look like in the finished product, because you're starting to consider where switches are going, where power points are going, as well as where all your appliances are going to be. So first and foremost, I think it's important that we have a look at the different size cables that I'm using, because that'll give you an understanding of why I use different ones for different parts of the van. Most of the cables are represented here. The vast majority of the cabling I'm using, I actually bought 100 meters worth, which is probably a bit much, is 4mm twin core cable. And it's twin core because it has a protective outer sheath, but then it has both cables running inside it, a positive and a negative. And you can take off this outer sheath and split them to go to your devices. So the real benefit about running twin core is that you're going to need a positive and negative to each. And this just means you have to run one length instead of running two separate cables. And the reason I've chosen 4mm is actually much thicker than you need for a lot of appliances, say lighting and things like that. But one thing with 12 volt systems, and because this van is so big, is you've got to consider voltage drop over a distance. And the other thing is I'm going to be daisy chaining quite a few appliances.
Today we're going to learn how to daisy chain.
And if you have no idea what that means, I didn't either. And it's something that I've learned from my last build to this one that's going to make it a lot easier for running cables and also reduce the amount of cables I need. Now, I'm just going to point out the rest of these cables that you can see here. So this is my AC power. It is the 230 volt cable, and I've only run a little bit of this, but this is essentially for my power points that need to be run off my inverter. And with that, if you don't understand the difference between AC and DC, or your only knowledge is about the legendary Australian band, then AC stands for alternating current, DC stands for direct current. AC is what all your household appliances run off, and then DC is what is used in a 12 volt system. And a lot of the smaller electrical appliances, or anything that has a lithium battery in it, that is DC powered. If you look at the little square that comes on the power cord to, say, your computer, that little square is actually a tiny inverter that is converting the AC power to DC. And that's the same with the little mobile phone wall plugs. They're inverters for your phones. So all those things with lithium batteries are meant to be 12 volt anyway. And that's why they can work really well on this Caravan 12 volt system. Okay, is everyone still with me there? Now, these two cables are my PV cables coming from my solar panels, so they're going to be the only ones of those in the van. And then finally, this big thick one you can see is actually another twin core. It is a positive and negative in there. It is a 8 gauge, and the reason it is here is for the section that I'm going to show you next, which is why you don't need to run all of your smaller gauge all the way down to the battery. So if you look at this area down here under my lovely couch, you will see that this is where all my large cables terminate. And that is because this is where my lithium battery bank is going to be, as well as my solar charge controller, inverter, etc. Now, if you follow this large cable I just pointed out, which is the 8 gauge, up, it follows all the way up, and then it will come out here. So this 8 gauge cable is what's going to bring power up from the battery up to the fuse block, which is going to be installed in the overhead cupboards. And what the fuse block does is, if you picture that every appliance needs to come back to the battery, the positive and negative, to get powered, it would be a shit show down here if every single thing was running down here. So what the fuse block does is it provides a little station up here where each appliance can be fused, and then just one main thicker power cable, the 8 gauge one, runs down to the battery. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. If you are a little bit confused right now, then let's take a very short break from electrical and check back in with the other projects that I've been trying to get done this week. And I must warn you, I did buy a new toy. Why do these bugs always feel the need to land in the paint? I hope you can get out of there, buddy. He's making a slow way across the board. So I'm absolutely stoked with how these have come up with the spray gun. And just so you know what each pieces are, these two are the new headliner shelf, and these two pieces are for the headboards of my bed. Now this is more like it, Australia. So I've just run the cabling for my entry light LED, and it is actually a perfect example of where using the daisy chain concept can save you a lot of hassle and wiring. And what is this daisy chaining, you might ask?
The term daisy chaining has been used in electrical engineering as well as in computer networking to refer to a wiring scheme where multiple devices are wired together in a ring. In electrical engineering, devices can be connected, allowing for one power source to power a number of devices through this chain of wiring. I can hook up the outputs of one power supply to my load and then connect a wire from the positive input from one load to another. I can also do the same for the negative outputs of the power supply to the negative inputs of the load. This can greatly reduce the amount of wiring needed.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so here is where the entry light LED switch has to run to, and that has come all the way from the fuse block down the other end. Now this is where in my last build I would have then ran a whole nother positive and negative, because I also want to have a reading light here for above the swivel seat once it's installed. But when you daisy chain, you don't need to do that. Instead, all I need is this short little bit of cable with the positive and negative in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it from the switch here, daisy chain it, and then it'll just go straight to the light. Just daydreaming of this van being completely done. I have to say, I feel like I'm kind of at that halfway point or just over, and I've lost a little bit of momentum. I need to keep going and keep plugging it out. I cannot wait to be enjoying this van, but at the moment I need to get this electrics done. I have done the majority of it, but I'm going to keep going probably into the evening to just get it all finished. And I want to put it out there that if you're looking at this going, shit, that is a lot of wiring, don't be thrown off. You can do a really basic electrical setup with a lot less. This is really going to the other end of the spectrum where I've got a lot of appliances going in, and you know, I'm double switching and doing quite a lot of things that isn't necessary, but I think because this is going to be my home, it's going to make a huge difference in the long run for comfort and things. So I'm excited for it to all be done, but I can't get ahead of myself. I got to keep plugging away. Good morning. So good news is the electrical wiring is all running complete, but even better news is that it is time for my morning coffee. Now, I did go to boil the kettle inside like a sucker and then figured this would actually be a perfect load test for my new battery system. So for my batteries, I have two 200 amp hour lithium Solar King batteries connected in parallel, and that is a whole heap of power. I am running them off this 2000 watt Xantrex inverter, which I absolutely love. And the kettle itself is rated to 1800 to 2200 watts of power. So it's kind of pushing it a little bit. Now these Solar King batteries I sourced in Australia. They're from an Australian distributor and they are kind of like entry-level lithium batteries. They're way cheaper than some of the other drop-ins. And I have to say with that, sometimes drop-in batteries get a bit of a bad rap. And the main thing people say that's negative about them isn't to do with their storage capacity. They've got 400 amp hours between them, and 400 amp hours lithium is like 600 amp hours with an AGM. So that is so much more power than I've ever had, and I'm really excited about that. But the main negative thing people say about the cheaper drop-in lithium batteries is that they don't have as high a C rating, and what the C rating means is how much output the batteries can put out in one kind of bigger surge. So for example, if you wanted to run a large appliance like a kettle, if you had, say, only one of these 200 amp hour batteries, it would not run a 2000 watt inverter because it's got a 1C rating. You would need two of these like I have, and that should be enough to run 2000 watts. So that's the only thing you've got to be careful of if you're going for a cheaper battery. Okay, let's see if it can do this kettle. Inverter's powering on, getting 13 volts, battery's full. Lights come on the kettle. Seeing, so you can see the battery level drops. So it's saying 11.9 because there's that drawer on it. And it's saying it's a 1.93 kilowatt load, which is 1,930 watts. Let's see if this kettle starts to boil. I think it's safe to say that that was a complete success, especially seeing how that was really pushing its power limits. Let's see how much of the battery it used. So you can see now that the load is off it. It is down to 12.8 volts. So it lost 0.2 volts for boiling that kettle. And I think that is pretty bloody amazing. Good work, batteries. Whilst I'm waiting for that coffee to be ready, I realised I didn't mention yesterday, but it is pertinent for me to say that in Australia, and I think Europe as well, you are not allowed to hook up the 230 volt AC power yourself in the van. So I've just laid those cables out for the 230 AC, but I'm getting an electrician in to sign all of that off. So 12 volt stuff is fine, you can do yourself, but AC stuff has the potential to be really dangerous if done incorrectly. So make sure you get an electrician to sign that off, and you'll need that if you want to register it as a motorhome anyway. Damn, that looks good. And if you're wondering whether it was worth it to recess those walls for my bed, I now have 190 centimeters across. I'm 185, so that's perfect for me. And it has gained me, realistically, it's gained me about 6 centimeters on either side, so 12 centimeters in total. That's huge. This is the nicest day there has been in ages here. It is so beautiful today. I only wish the sun would stay out longer. It makes such a difference to your mood. I thought this would be a great time to answer the weekly question, and today it is from April Vivas. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And she actually timely asked how my recertification was going for paramedics. In Australia, you have to apply for national registration. That's only happened since I've been away, so being away for 4 years, it's been a bit of a process. But April, great news. This week I actually just got my registration approved, so I'm now good to work anywhere in Australia, and it really leaves me with a bit of a tough decision, which is whether I start applying for jobs straight away or whether I give myself, say, another month and a half to finish this build off before going into work. I am a little bit concerned when I restart working as a paramedic. I am going to have so much to relearn, and it's going to take a lot of mental energy. So to be able to do it and build the van at the same time, which is also potentially going to be my home, might just be a bit messy. So I think I'm just going to really go hammer and tong to get this van finished as quick as possible so I can reapply and get back on the job. Very excited to do so, a little bit nervous. Thank you, April. On to the next job. As you can see, I have removed the old headliner plastic shelf that sat really high and lost a lot of this space, whereas now this storage space up here is massive. I'm about to install the new shelves, but I just wanted to show how I am fixing them. I've had to level this out so it'll sit properly, so I've put some packers on here, and I've actually cut this one to size so it sits flat there, and I've also done the same on the sides. Overhead shelving, done. And is a build day even a build day anymore if I don't get out my new favourite toy? God, I love this thing. Okay, so here it is. As I said last night, it is a lot. There's a lot of cabling going on there and all fed down to the battery bank. Who wants to join me for the lugging party? Because that is going to be a bit of work in itself. But I'm hoping I've now covered pretty much everything. I also wanted to mention with any of the AC twin and earth cable, it has to be in a conduit. You have to run it in a conduit, whereas the 12 volt stuff doesn't have to be in a conduit. The last thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of electrical was switches when they're required, and really just to show that it's not that complicated. The first thing is when they're not required is when the appliance you're running to already has an inbuilt switch. Take, for example, the Maxxair fan. It already has its own control switch. So all you have to do is run a positive and negative to it, and then you're good to go, and then bring it back to the fuse block so it's fused. Whereas your LED lights, for example, which I'm going to be having up here, they don't come with a switch. So that is when you need to run it to a switch. which the majority of my items are going to be switched here, which is in the back of the kitchen there. The reason there's so many cables there is because I've got 5 lights switched to that one spot. I figured it was the best spot in the van because it's right next to the bed. I've also got the entry light all the way down there, so when I come in, I can flick that on. With switching itself, the main thing you got to remember is that you've got to run to the switch, the positive and negative first, and then from the switch, all you do is run to each light. And what I've done, you can see here, for example, is I've ran to this light location, left a loop because I'll be cutting that and attaching the cables to the light when it's there, and then ran it on to the next light. And you just do that all the way until you get to the end. And this one here is the last light on the circuit, so it is just the final one, and that's where it will end. Then it'll be as simple as flicking a switch to turn it on and off. I just caught them as they were running away. I have just been securing everything, so I wanted to show you. For starters, I've neatened up this area a lot because my boards, with the battens, my boards are going to need to go across there, so I needed to make sure it was close enough to the wall. Another thing I've done is our good old friend Sikaflex. Every single part where the cables come through where it could rub, I've added Coro, and then I've Sikaflexed them in place so there's no rubbing at all. It's really important. It also helps reduce the rattling. The sun is setting on what has turned out to be an absolute beautiful day, and it's really lifted my spirits back up. I have to say, at the start of this working week, I was feeling the least motivated I had been for the build. I was just ready for a break and, you know, ready to kind of get back out on the road and start socializing and everything else. But after getting the electrical done, I kind of starting to see the light. I am excited to get into the build tomorrow morning because I'm going to be preparing to get that shower installed. So next week's video, come rain, hail or shine, is going to be the shower cubicle install video. I'm also hoping to add the toilet to that. But one final thing, I am also heavily considering cutting off pretty much all my hair for the first time in 4 or so years. Objections or encouragement in the comments below. Either way, please give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you all next week.